What's going on? It's Michael with WalkthePath. I'm here today with Dr. Laurah Lukin, and I first got introduced to her through a run group here in Cincinnati. And from a friend, I'd heard a little bit about her story. So I wanted to bring her in today to talk about her journey and then talk a little bit about running. She's very big into running, and we'll get a little bit more into that in detail here shortly. So Laurah, talk a little bit, let's first talk about what you're doing today, and then start with the journey, you know, where you were when you were little and what you were doing, and we can just take it from there.
Sounds good.
Okay.
So I am currently an elite runner, and I race primarily marathons and half marathons. I'm better at longer distances. I used to do a lot of other endurance sports. I used to do Ironman, half Ironmans, and I used to be a dancer as well. That's actually where I got my start.
Okay.
When I was a kid, I was a classical dancer. I did a lot of different, I did jazz and tap, but I mostly focused on ballet.
Okay.
And I did that for, almost, from the time I was 4 until I was almost 18. So a long time.
Okay. So what was your schedule like when you were into dance at that age?
Well, when I was little, it was just kind of like, you know, every little kid doing dance. And
Sure.
You go and you put a tutu on and you kind of fumble around. And then once I got a little bit more serious, it would be longer sessions, and then at some point it was twice a day, in the morning and in the evening.
Okay.
When I was in high school, sometimes not all the time, especially if I was dancing a specific part in a show or something like that.
Okay. And so at that point, you pretty much had aspirations to join the ballet, or?
I thought so. You know, it's one of those things where that's what I had done the entire time I was growing up, so it just made sense. And if, you know, someone at that age tells you you're okay at something and all your friends are doing it, it kind of seems like a natural progression.
Mm-hmm.
But I ended up not going that way. It wasn't necessarily the healthiest of lifestyles. I would say there was a lot of pressure for certain body types, and I just didn't feel like it was exactly what I wanted to do.
Well, and when you say that there's a lot of pressure, like what was going on? What were you expected to do? Tell me a little bit more about like that life.
There was, they had registered dietitians for us, and they would weigh you, and very similar to, I think, wrestling, where you have to be, I danced category partners, so I was lifted.
Okay.
And in order to be lifted, you had to be light.
Sure.
Right?
That makes sense.
So there was pressure just to be a certain, a certain weight and stuff like that. And I was 17 years old, and I liked pizza. I still like pizza a lot. And it just wasn't, that kind of pressure isn't what I really wanted to do. I have a type A personality, and I like being focused and having, goals, but it just wasn't fun. And I really kind of believe that once something stops becoming fun, or you stop enjoying it, then there's not, that's not maybe a sign that you should continue to do it. I mean, obviously, everything's not going to be fun all the time, but,
right.
Day in and day out, I started dreading going to practice, and I wasn't having fun, and I didn't find the excitement, dancing parts that I used to be really excited doing, so.
Mm-hmm. So, when did you ultimately get out of that, and what was the final decision for you? Just to that point, not having fun, you said, I'm done? Or did that take some time to get to that point?
I said that I was done, and I thought that my parents were not going to necessarily think that was the best decision, because we had put so much time and effort, and they were totally fine with it. They were like, okay, cool. They were really supportive, and I ended up going, I was like, they're like, well, what do you want to do? And I said, I think I want to be an archaeologist. And they're like, oh, okay. So I ended up going to college. I went and I did my undergraduate at the University of Indianapolis.
Okay.
It's one of very, very few institutions that have an undergraduate degree in archaeology. Usually that's a graduate degree. And I got a triple major in archaeology, anthropology, and human biology.
Okay.
And then I decided that I thought I wanted to be I always liked human origins. I thought like understanding where we came and how we got to the point that we are at now was very interesting. So then I thought that I didn't really want to be an archaeologist, but I really liked dentition, and I thought that was really interesting. So I wanted to become a paleoanthropologist, which is basically just the study of human origins.
Okay.
And I got a master's degree in human biology and worked as a forensic anthropologist for about 4 years. Here, or not here, in Indianapolis.
Okay.
And then I went down to South Africa,
Wow.
and in Belize, and subsequently Guatemala. I was on a grant in Belize and was very young and miscalculated what I needed for the grant and ended up almost running out, so I had to go across the border to Guatemala just to be able to ride my time out, and so I would go back and forth across the borders.
So this was just you by yourself applying for the grant and putting it
It was
all
my
together?
friend and I, actually. It was
Okay, so there were two of you.
There was 2 of us, and it was so funny. We were down there and we were measuring teeth. We were measuring molars and the kind of the flat teeth in the back of your mouth.
Mm-hmm.
And I was trying to, for my thesis, for my master's thesis, develop a sexing technique where you could measure the cusps or the bumps on molars and determine whether an individual was a male or a female. Because teeth are like rocks in your head; they don't decay the same way the rest of your body does. So in a forensic context, I mean, if you can do anything, you can bury a body, you can burn a body, which is morbid as it sounds. That's unfortunately what happens a lot of the time. But if you have this tooth and you can identify male or female, then you eliminate half of the population that you're looking for. Right?
Sure.
So this sounds like a really good idea to me. So I was down there measuring teeth. Turns out that my sexting technique was only 70% accurate, so it wasn't very good. But that's what you do with your master's thesis, right? You do crazy things like that.
You got to try it.
Right.
So you're in Guatemala, and then you're realizing that money's kind of running short.
We were in Guatemala, and we were like sitting there, and we were like thinking through all of our finances, and we're like, huh, that's odd. And we somehow realized that we were going to be about a week's worth of money short. And at the same time, my friend, she was on the grant as my assistant,
Okay.
and her name was Sarah. Sarah, who was very, very, very pale, decides to lay out on the beach.
Oh, jeez.
Well, it was like the pool. We were in kind of on the border of Belize and Guatemala in a town called San Ignacio. And she got so burned. I mean, really, really, really burned. And the day before that, we had gone out to this archaeological site that nobody told us we were going out to. So instead of having like proper gear, like long pants and stuff like that, if you're going to be romping around the jungle, we had shorts on.
Oh no.
And they have these things called bot flies in Belize, and there are flies and they bite you, but when they bite you, they lay their larvae inside of you.
Oh, jeez.
And so what happens is, like, you start feeling this itching, and the larva hatches underneath your skin, and then you have to wait for this little proboscis to shoot up, which is like their breathing apparatus. And you should put duct tape on it for a couple days, and then you have like a little larva thing. We got 3.
Oh, jeez.
So I didn't really know what to do because we needed to get across the border to Belize, from Belize to Guatemala, and she had like 2nd-degree sunburn.
Oh no.
And I thought they don't really regulate pharmaceuticals in the same way that they do here.
Sure.
So I like walked down to the drugstore and got her Tylenol with codeine.
Okay.
I pumped her full of codeine, Tylenol. And got this crazy like purple like topical ointment. So I have topical ointment where I have all these botfly things. I covered her so she looks like a Oompa Loompa. And we are like walking across the border in Belize and Guatemala, from Belize to Guatemala, getting on this bus with chickens, and she's just like half out of it. There are people just looking at us like we look so out of place. And we ended up going and staying in the Flores for the last week. But it was an adventure. But it was fun. But I like doing it. That's kind of stuff I like. So.
Sure.
Yeah.
So then after that, where did you start to take your life?
After that, I got accepted to a PhD program
Okay.
for biological anthropology, biomedical anthropology.
And got rid of all the botflies.
Got rid of all yeah, those were all out.
Left those back.
I did save them though. And so at IU, so I went into IU and I decided to. I'm guessing I missed a whole big chunk of this. So in the middle of being in graduate school in the University of Indianapolis when I was doing my first master's degree,
Sure.
I was actually right when I started. The month before I started, I was diagnosed with breast cancer.
Okay.
And I didn't know if I was going to actually be able to go to graduate school.
So what age was this?
This was right on the border of 22, so I was like 21 turning 22.
Okay.
It was that summer. My birthday is in July. And I was so irritated. I mean, I know it sounds really funny to say, but that's what it was. It was a pure irritation that, so I was like, I was going to go to graduate school, and then I was going to get a PhD, and this was just like this big interruption. And it was really a very odd experience because it was fast. I didn't even know that I had breast cancer. Like, I randomly found a lump one day and I was like, that's odd. The problem though is what happens is, right when you graduate from undergraduate, you actually pretty much get kicked off your parents' insurance, right?
Yep. Or at least at that time.
Yeah, at that time I guess you did. I don't know how it is now. But then, when you go to graduate school, you can get insurance through the graduate program, right? Okay. But there's a time lapse of about however many months, right? But I'm like, I'm 21. What could happen, right? I was like, oh, you got breast cancer. So I didn't have insurance at the time. I was like, what is this? What is this lump? So I ended up going to Planned Parenthood because it's like a free clinic, right? Mm-hmm. I was poor at the time. I was really poor. And the nurse practitioner who was there, who was very nice, but she was just like, oh, probably nothing, just monitor it, come back in a couple months or whatever. And thankfully, someone I knew was like, I don't think that's really the way to go here. And they were very emphatic that I go and get a second opinion, which I did. I ended up going up to St. Vincent's in Indianapolis to their breast center. Okay. And it turned out to be stage 1 breast cancer. So, and they were able to, I had surgery, I had a round of a couple of different drugs, and I decided that I wasn't going to have any radiation. So the type that I had, I didn't need to have chemotherapy because the stage that it was at and the type of breast cancer there was no risk for it metastasizing or spreading throughout my body. But they said you don't have to have radiation if you don't want to, which means that I could start my graduate program. Oh wow, okay. Right? And I was like, deal. Yeah. Right? Because again, I was more irritated than anything else. So I went through my graduate program, went to Belize, got botflies, etc. And then I got accepted to IU into my doctoral program, and I got a little over a year into that. And I kind of switched again. I was actually studying hormones. I got very interested in the endocrine system and how what we do and what we eat affects our hormones, especially in women athletes. Because I was running at that time, not at any high level, but I was training for my first marathon, I think. Okay. I'd done a bunch of halves, and I was doing it for fun.
So dipping your toes in. And,
yeah. Okay. And I was interested in looking at hormones and how they would affect female performance. So that's what I was kind of doing my research on. And it was December, end of November or December of 2008. And I was going in for routine ultrasounds at that time to monitor my breast cancer because I was too young to have mammograms. Okay. So we did ultrasounds, and on a routine ultrasound, they found another mass in my breast. So, which actually wasn't surprising. So when I had breast cancer the first time, I was young and I was kind of naive. I didn't have a strong network because, especially at that time, even though kind of the culture has shifted away from that now, we know better. But people my age didn't get breast cancer. Right. So any of the support systems that were out there were, older women who I was like, I have nothing to talk to you about. I mean, as nice as they were, there's no relation that I could have. And then I actually joined up with an organization called Young Survival Coalition. And they were able, kind of to help me. And so I had that network. So when I was diagnosed the second time, I kind of had more information. And it turns out if you, women with the type of breast cancer that I had, who opt out of having radiation the first time, tend to get reoccurrences.
Oh, okay.
So I ended up getting the reoccurrence, and then I had the rest of that breast removed. And I was in a clinical trial for point radiation therapy, and that was the end of it. I mean, hopefully I don't have it again, but I've been cancer free since February 20th of 2009. Wow. So, which was really good. Thank you. So that actually inspired me to change my entire dissertation focus.
Oh wow. Okay.
I remember I was sitting in with my advisor, and I was venting, I think would be probably the best way to put it. I was so irritated that all of the research, because I was very used to reading scientific articles and journals and stuff like that, so I was reading all about breast cancer and stuff, and I was telling him, I was so irritated that all of these studies only look at postmenopausal women. All of these studies, they're not looking at young women, but they're using that same information to treat young women. I said, and all of these studies are not looking at, the way that diet is affecting people, or they're not looking at, and I'm going on and on and on and on. And he's just sitting there and he's listening to me, and he's nodding, and I stop, and then he looks at me and he goes, well, why aren't you doing that? And I kind of said, well, anthropologists don't study breast cancer. And he said, so? And I was like, okay. So I ended up changing my entire dissertation.
How far into it were you at this point?
I was still at the beginning stages. I hadn't done my quals yet, so it wasn't, I mean, it was work, but it wasn't, horrendously insurmountable task to change anything. And I ended up looking at how dietary fat specifically and exercise or physical activity affects estrogen levels. Okay. And because we know that the level of estrogen that some women have in their body can increase the risk of estrogen-dependent breast cancers. Not all breast cancers, just estrogen-dependent breast cancers. So I looked at how that affected young women and how that affected old women. So postmenopausal, sure. And how that was different. And it turned out to be pretty different. It turned out that eating a diet in higher polyunsaturated fat had a protective effect for young women. So,
and what's an example of that? What type of food?
So like your nuts, okay. Avocados, like healthy plant-based fats. Okay. So a diet that was higher in that type of fats actually was protective. Okay. But most of the literature was identifying fat, of course, because they're not looking at different types of fat that are, they're just blanketing fat, had a deleterious or increased the risk of breast cancer in older women, postmenopausal women. But that was the opposite of what was true if you looked at very specific types of fat for younger women. And because I looked at human evolution and human origins, this makes sense. So if you look at the human as a biological organism with the goal to reproduce or have babies, why on earth would you ever have fat, especially